Me'ayin yavo ezri, esayin el heharin. Me'ayin yavo ezri, me'im Adonai ose shamayim v'aretz. Ezri, me'im Adonai ose shamayim v'aretz. I lift up my eyes to the mountains. What is the source of my help? My help comes from Adonai, maker of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot give way. Your protector will not slumber. See, the protector of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. God is your guardian, your protection. The sun will not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. God will guard you from harm. God will guard your soul, your coming and going now and forever. Psalm 121 speaks about God's strength and guiding hand throughout our life. And yet we know, even in the fullest of life, 94 years, eventually that ending comes. It is an incredible testament to be at a funeral for someone who is almost 95 and to fill almost the entire chapel, to know the number of lives, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, friends, the people who are touched by Avette and her full life with us. We just passed the 40th day of the Omer. The Omer is the day, the period of counting from crossing through Egypt out into the land of Israel as the Jews are in Bamidbar, in the desert. And we're told that this Omer counting period, every day has a different attribute, a different quality you need. And just yesterday, the quality was endurance. Endurance and strength. To take the challenges that arrive, to make the best of your life, to do it with a smile and love and joy, and to demonstrate to others not only that life is meant to be lived, but how life is meant to be lived. And you'll hear in some of the wonderful tributes to Avette by her family how she did so. And so we turn to words of Ecclesiastes, Kohelet, L'kol zman ve'etz l'chol chafetz techet hashamayim. For everything there is a season, a time for every experience under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to grieve, a time to dance, sometimes at the same time, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace, a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to discard, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silent and a time to speak. This is a time for memory, a time to remember how Avette Covitt lived so that we can best emulate her practices, her full life, the love she showed as a grandmother, a great-grandmother, a parent, a member of this community, a fashionable citizen of our city of Fort Worth, and a lifelong Texan. And so we listen to words from those who knew her best and loved her, first from Van and Marilyn, and then from Adam and Gary, as they share memories of a mother and a grandmother.
First, I'd like to thank everyone for being here today. I know some of you came from very long distances, and it was much appreciated that you're here. Avette Miriam Lando Stenzler Covitt. That was my mom. A long name for such a petite lady. All 5 feet of her. Most importantly, everyone who knew her, this giant soul, was the kindest person ever, including her caregivers who vied for an opportunity to take care of her until her last breath. Born October 20th, 1929 in Abilene, Texas, if there is another Abilene, 9 days before the Great Crash. She lived her early childhood during the Depression. Her parents were Nathan and Bessie Landau. Nathan was a traditional peddler, and he focused mostly on shoes and apparel. And they moved from Abilene to San Saba for a few years, and then they finally moved to San Antonio, where my mom went to Thomas Jefferson High School and graduated there, and a short stint at the University of Texas at Austin. My mom met her future husband, my dad, David Stenzler, and she married him in 1950. And I was born in 1951, and then in 1954 came my little sister Karen, who passed away less than a year ago. Mom and Dad began married life in Grand Prairie. With the help of my grandfather, Max Stenzler, they opened up Grand Prairie Dry Goods. And it was a general store, and they sold ladies' dresses, among other things. And their merchant lives took them from Grand Prairie to Dallas to El Paso to Albuquerque to Tallahassee and finally to Fort Worth in 1960. And Mom and Dad ran several different apparel concepts, or they created several different apparel concepts in Fort Worth, including David's House of Fashion, Pizzazz, Fashion Fair, and finally they saw a new opportunity as petites began to be manufactured, and my mom and dad created Petites Limited, the first petites only ladies store in Texas. I'm not sure that everybody here knows what a petite is. It's for women 5'4" and under. And it was quite difficult at the time to find clothing that would fit people, so that's why they started the store. So funny enough, a lot of people couldn't figure out how to say Avette. So in the 1960s, my mom became Anne to a legion of her customers, and she and I closed the last petite store in 2002, and she was 72 when she retired. Interestingly enough, my mom's heritage began way before she and Dad moved here. After the great hurricane of 1900 in Galveston, her maternal grandfather, Rabbi /Shoket, Abraham Gordon, left the disaster to come to Fort Worth, where he and his wife spent the rest of their lives. After my dad passed away in 1996, my mom and Ned Covitt, and she met Ned Covitt, and they got married a few years later. And they enjoyed life together, traveling the world together until Ned passed away in 2011 at the age of 102. And Mom loved the theater. She and I went to New York on countless buying trips, and the moment that we got to New York for the joint buying trip, my mom would always say, "Okay, it's time to go get in the half-price ticket line." So we did, and every time we went to New York, we always saw a play. And that was like countless times, and some of the Some of the shows that we saw on Broadway were Cats, Miss Saigon, Hair, The Lion King, and many, many more. I think we probably went to about 30 different plays. And one time in New York, we were going into an apparel building to buy, and in New York they have a lot of revolving doors in the fronts of buildings, and I had gone through, and my mom was right behind me, and I heard a little scream, and I looked behind me, and my mom was saying, "You can't have my purse," and this man was trying to steal her purse from her, and she won. So the guy that was trying to take the purse from her didn't realize that she was a depression child and nobody was going to take that purse away from her. And Mom's greatest fun was in our family pastime, and she was queen of Jolly Clowns bowling at Wedgwood Bowl. I think she had a children's ball, but she did get her fair share of strikes. Back to love. Mom loved our dad, Karen, and me very much. And anything that we ever wanted, even though that we were not exactly very wealthy, my sister and I never wanted for anything. We got anything we needed. Mom was preceded in death by her parents, Nathan and Bessie Lando, her two sisters, Selma Weiner and Mildred Perlman, and her daughter, my beloved little sister, Karen Delavan. And husbands David Stenzler and Ned Covitt, and two of her great-grandchildren, Isaac David Izzy Stenzler and Claire Anna Delavan. Mom is survived by me, Van Stenzler, and my wife, Marilyn, and her son-in-law, Tom Delavan, and her grandchildren who she adored. And the grandchildren's names are Adam Delavan and his wife, Kate, and their sons, Anton and Jaden, Gary Delavan and his wife Cynthia, and their sons Spencer and Archer, Zachary Stenzler, our son, and his wife Nina, and their daughters, and my grandchildren Zoe and Sasha, and not to leave out Sarah Stenzler, my daughter, and many nieces and nephews. I want to thank all of her caregivers for giving her such excellent care in the last few years. And I would like to make a special thanks to someone who never knew how much he touched her life, and his name is John Gray. John Gray is a hairdresser, and my mom looked forward every week to going and getting her hair done. And Linda Thompson, who's out here today, took her there many, many, many times, many weeks, and I would take her there sometimes, and Marilyn would take her there, but she had to go every week, and she was always so proud of her hair after it got done. And I don't think that John ever realized how happy he made her. Mom was a 60-plus member of the Beth-El congregation in Fort Worth, and I'd like to leave you with a saying that we found in her apartment. And it says, "The greatest gift that we can give to those that have left us is to live life fully in their place."
Here are some of the words people use to describe Avette: beautiful, sweet, happy, kind, caring, special, funny, thoughtful, loving. I have had two wonderful mothers, my mom, Sid Kabuti, and my second mom, Avette. Before I met Avette, I would hear the frightful stories people used to describe their mothers-in-law. I didn't know exactly what to expect, but once we met, I knew how lucky I was to have Avette as my mother-in-law. Avette and I always said, "Love you," or "I love you," before hanging up from a phone call or leaving after a visit. But on Mother's Day 3 weeks ago, when Mom was in the hospital holding her hand, I had the opportunity to make sure she knew. I told her I loved her, and she told me she loved me too. I said, "No, Mom, I want you to know I'm not just saying it, I mean it. I love you, I really love you." And she just said, "I know you do." It's hard to imagine that you could ever feel for another person the way you feel for your own parents. But with Avette, it's hard to imagine feeling any other way. I was so lucky to have her as a mother-in-law, as my second mother, as a friend. She will always be in my heart.
And Gary and Adam?
That was a touching tribute, Van and Marilyn. We appreciate that. I actually learned some things about Grammy that I did not know, so that's really interesting.
I now know where Mom got her bowling skills from.
Yeah. So we have some anecdotes just from the grandchild perspective, and it's nice to hear the ones from the older generation as well. Or we'd love to hear more about the first 60 to 70 years of her life that we didn't get to partake in. But to us, she wasn't a vet. She's our Grammy. Same goes for Zach and Sarah. She's Grammy to all of us. In fact, I remember the first time when you realize that your grandparents actually have a real name and it's not just Grammy. And we thought she had the coolest name because we didn't know the difference between Avette and Corvette at the time. so we just thought that was the coolest grandmother. But first of all, we see this as more of a celebration of her life, as Rabbi was referencing, that we shouldn't feel sad. We do feel sad, but we're also fortunate that we shared so many good and quality years with Grammy, even all the way up to the very end. And learned how to care for our own families from the best of the best. In fact, the last thing that she said to us just a couple weeks ago was to make sure to cherish all the memories that we made together. And we are fortunate to have made 40 plus years of memories together. But some of our best ones are centered around our annual trips to Fort Worth for Thanksgiving.
Yeah, to us, Grammy was synonymous with Thanksgiving. Like, she was the mascot of Thanksgiving for us, because we grew up in San Antonio, and my dad's parents were local, so we'd see them, in day-to-day lives. So coming to Fort Worth to see Grammy and Poppy was a huge deal for us. And even though it was a 5-hour car ride, which we didn't have entertainment in a car back in those days, so it felt like forever. But we'd finally pull up. We knew we were there because the Suburban felt like it was a rocket ship about to take off in their driveway as soon as we pulled in. I still remember the smell of their garage when we'd walk in, the sound of the door to the garage brushing against the carpet when it would open up. It would smell like turkey when we would walk in because Grammy was baking the turkey the night before, so it would be ready. Actually, she probably had her arm all the way inside the turkey getting it ready at that time. But that was then preceded by many very aggressive games of tackle football in the front yard with Zach and Sarah. It didn't really resemble football that much. It was more of just wrestling with a football in the general vicinity of where it was.
That's true. She had, we're just coming up with all, I mean, she knew how to make a home away from home feel like a home. She piled tons and tons of toys into the bedroom that we always stayed in, to the point where you almost couldn't get to your bed. You had to climb over the toys to get there. It was probably a decoy to keep us in the room in the mornings when we got up so early, but it was still really fun.
She always kept her Atari. So this is probably in the late 90s, and we were still playing her Atari and battle tanks and...
Yeah, it was fun, yeah. I don't even know why they had that Atari. I think maybe Poppy played it, but... and other things, I mean, for some reason we associate Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory with always watching that at her house, playing on her organ. They had a real organ in the back living room, which is always kind of fun to play on.
Yeah, playing outside. Anybody who's been to the Winifred house may remember the fallen cypress leaves that are on the ground in about November. The red ones that stick to every piece of you when you walk and track them back into the house. So you can imagine what post-football games, what we looked like in her yard.
Yeah, Grammy and Poppy were very patient with that, I'm sure, because we would drag those cypress leaves all over the house. We had plenty of fun times. I mean, because of Grammy and getting the family together and everything, we were fortunate to get to know our cousins really well, Zach and Sarah, the Stenslers, the Goldsteins, everybody in Fort Worth. I mean, the extended family, everybody up here. We had a great time. We went to Dallas Cowboys games together, had fun experiences. We got to watch Zach line up with the cheerleaders every time because he won that, was it some kind of lottery every time? So she always had the little cereal boxes, which we thought was kind of magical when we were young. Instead of pouring out of one big box, they make the little boxes. So there's all these funny little things that you remember about being at Grammy and Poppy's house.
Yeah, she was always very big on getting up and watching the Thanksgiving Day parade. I remember doing that every time, and then immediately afterwards wondering why we had to watch the Lions play right after the end of the parade.
That's true. Yeah, and making those dot matrix printer banners and that kind of raucous. I don't know if everybody remembers those, but those really screechy printers that where you had to peel the stuff off. So we used to do that all day long and run her out of ink and stuff. So, but these are all great things that really make you feel warm as a child, and great memories that we got to make with Grammy and the extended family together. But she was really our rock. She was our stabilizing monarch of the family. She was cool as a cucumber, as everybody knows, and she was a Southern lady through and through. Except the time she didn't tell anybody and eloped with the second love of her life, Ned Covitt. So that was always a surprise to us, but she was young at heart, so whatever makes her happy, we were happy with. But her first love of her life, Poppy, or Van's father and our grandfather, gave her plenty of antics along the way to prove how level-headed she could be, which we all know she was. For example, she, the time that I knocked his toupee off while we were playing on the bed when I was about 4, and she had to console me and try to figure out a way to explain how that happens. Or the time when Poppy wasn't allowed to have, this was after he had some health issues and he wasn't allowed to eat popcorn. And so we were walking through our house, Grammy on one side and my mom on the other side of Poppy. And he saw a big bucket of popcorn sitting over on the counter. And he went with that good left hand and all the way into the, I got a good old hand of popcorn. It was trying to get in his mouth, and Grammy and my mom were both on that arm trying to get it out, trying to keep it from going in his mouth. So they had a lot to deal with, but she knew how to stay level-headed. So she always wrote the sweetest handwritten birthday cards. I mean, there's so many things we could say about Grammy. She always proudly referred to her grandkids and her great-grandkids as her dividends. So I thought that was really sweet.
Yeah, I thought Grammy had such a unique and rare combination of the ability to make everybody feel so loved and so special, but also she was tough as nails. at the same time. One of the toughest human beings that I've ever met. And I feel like I learned a lot about how to navigate life by just observing and seeing how she handled situations, how she treated people, that you treat people with the utmost respect and love them like they should. But life's going to go wrong and bad things are going to happen, and you just have to learn how to deal with those things and move on and don't let it derail you. And I saw her experience that so many times, and I feel like I've learned how to do that in my own life, watching how Grammy was so tough, so mentally tough. She focused on what she could control and made everybody feel special in the process. And there was no more evident example of that than when I moved to Dallas and we still had family down in San Antonio. I became her personal chauffeur down to the hill country, whether we were going to Fredericksburg or San Antonio. And, we had all kinds of antics and crazy trips. There was one where there was a snowstorm going on while I was trying to shuttle her from the front door into my car, but my car was really low and Grammy didn't move so fast at that time. And so by the time she actually got in the car, she was sitting in a big pile of snow inside of my car, prepared for a 5-hour drive. And there was another time when we were going down 281, we were just north of Lampasas, and I had run flat tires on my car. What they don't tell you is they only run flat for about 30 miles, and then they just tear up and disintegrate into nothing. So when you're in the middle of nowhere, it doesn't do you a lot of good to have run flat tires and no spare. So we're pulled off on the side of the road and call a tow truck to come get us, and they're going to tow us into Lampasas where my dad was going to come pick us up. But little did I realize is the tow truck was about the size of a big rig 18-wheeler, the front cab. And Grammy, again, wasn't very mobile at this time, but she actually thought it was really cool that she got to climb up and I get to hoist her up into the top of this cab. And she just thought it was cool because she'd never ridden in a big truck like that before, and she thought she'd make the most of it. And so that is a lesson learned on, when things go wrong, you got to see the bright part of the situation, and she was always that way, and we love her for it.
Yeah, so we are comforted knowing that Grammy's now reunited with our mom, Karen, and Poppy, and Ned, and everyone else that we care about up there, playing mahjong, doing bowling games again, catching up on gossip, picking on some turkey bones, and brainstorming their next clothing venture for all the heavenly petites. So we love you, Grammy, and everything you've done for this family, and may your memory always be a blessing.
We pause for a moment, although we have more grandchildren, family members to share memories. Red Goldstein, also a member of the family, also blesses us with helping many in this community at their time of grieving through assisting with funerals and working with our cemetery and those sacred acts. And when he is leading services for some of the members of our community, there's a favorite reading he likes to share. He's going to share that with us now, and then he's going to lead all of us also in the 23rd Psalm, which you'll be able to find inside these pamphlets. So come on up, Red.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just quickly, Avette, one time in my life was integral. It was 1980. I was a little unhappy with my father and uncle in the jewelry business, and I was thinking about maybe leaving. And so I went to Aunt Avette, and she said, "Give it a little more time, it'll work out." I said, "Great." 1986 came along, and I'm at the same loggerheads with my father and uncle of blessed memory. And she looks at me and she says, "Red, get the hell out of there." So I went into the brokerage business. But Avette was the one person in the family, the one adult person in the family of that generation that took the time to really hear me and listen and care about what I was going through from that professional standpoint. And as has already been mentioned, how tough she was and how strong she was. So she's right there in my heart. I particularly love this set of words that I'm going to share with you guys. As the rabbi mentioned, I'm blessed to have the opportunity to officiate a number of funerals here in our community. But this is one I particularly like. And when I'm going to say we remember, I want us all to say her name, Avette. Okay? So in the rising of the sun and in its going down, we remember Avette. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember Avette. In the opening of buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember. In the rustling of leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember Avette. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember Avette. When we are lost and sick at heart, we remember Avette. When we have joys we yearn to share, we remember Avette. So long as we live, Avette too shall live, for she is now a part of us, as we will always remember her. And with that, I would like for each of us to open your service flyer, and we will recite together the 23rd Psalm. And I want to make a mention here that in this particular version of the 23rd Psalm, there's a lot of versions, but this is the version that is a little bit old school. And since Avette would have been more comfortable with this version, this is what we fly with. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely in goodness, all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And one parting note about Avette. We know that she was 94, but Trey Harper from Robertson, Muller and Harper asked me, Red, how many days did she live? So I calculated it right quick. She lived 34,550 days. So.
Some more words first from grandchildren Zach and Sarah Stenzler, and then Terry Lanier and Melissa Weiner will also share some memories when they're done.
Like Gary and Adam said, we had a lot of really fond memories, particularly around Thanksgiving. Watching the Macy's Day Parade at her house was an annual tradition. Sarah always looked forward to going over and helping put together the sweet potato casserole, probably because she got to put marshmallows on it. The thing, though, that I remember most about Grammy, the feeling, is that she was always the constant. She was always there to help, to support, to advise. She never really made herself the center of attention, but she was always the foundation that held everything up and held everyone together. I remember growing up, she was always the person my parents relied on for advice, whether it was how to cook something, or if something went wrong, if I had a cold or a sunburn or an upset stomach, the first thing I do is call them and tell them I wasn't feeling well, and of course the first thing they do is call Grammy. And at a time with no cell phones, when people who weren't there were not really reachable, she was always there, and she was always ready to help in whatever way she was needed. And even 20 years later, Grammy was still that person that they'd call. About 10 years ago, my dad was standing on a stool, reaching into his reef tank trying to clean it when he fell off and shattered his leg. And this is an injury that laid him up for months, where he could barely get out of bed on his own. And for some reason, while he's lying on the floor in immense pain, he doesn't call 911, he calls Grammy. And of course, she was there. I was talking to him over these last couple weeks since she passed about how he had worked with her for more than 20 years. They worked together at Petite's Limited right up until the day they closed that store. Like he said, the day that she retired at 72. And I had asked what they each did at Petite's. I learned she was the buyer. She was the person that had her finger on the pulse of what their customers wanted, what merchandise they needed to order, and she ran the sales floor. And I asked him if he could have run that business without her. And he said no. And yet again, she was there. She was there for my dad. She was there for our family, working past 65 retirement age because we needed her. She was always this constant. And when people would ask Ned, Grammy's second husband, her 100-year-old second husband, about the secret to his longevity, he'd always reply, "I don't eat chicken." Well, Grammy not only ate chicken and turkey, she would clean the bones and leave nothing behind. Sarah was always Grammy's protege in that regard, and Grammy would have to threaten me with no dessert to get me to take even a bite off of a single piece of chicken on the bone. The night before I went to say goodbye to Grammy, I was sitting down to dinner with my family. My daughter Zoe was being picky as usual, saying she wanted mac and cheese and then refusing it when it was in front of her. She wanted some rolls and then refusing them once you put it on her plate. And then she requested a chicken leg, and that's what she calls chicken on the bone. And I figured she had no intention of eating it, but I still handed it over. And just a few minutes later, I looked up from my own plate after handing her that leg and saw a perfectly polished bone laying on her plate as she swallowed the last bite. And I asked her if she'd eaten the whole leg by herself, and she nodded. And my wife, Nina, said, "Grammy would be proud." I hope one day that my kids will think of me as I do of Grammy, as somebody that they can rely upon, no matter what. And even though we won't have Grammy's physical, constant presence to call on any longer, when we need her, she'll still be there for us, I think, in those little moments when I see a little bit of her in somebody else. And when I look at my kids, I'll be thankful that maybe I will never clean a bone the way that she did, but there are some traits that just skip a generation. Thank you.
I'm Terry Goldstein, and I'm a first cousin. But what I remember about Aunt Avette, I have a couple of good little stories that just were really special to me. All those things that you all are saying already, yes. Okay. But when we were little, back again to Thanksgiving and Rosh Hashanah and all these other parties we had at our house, my mother Barbara had, of course, we were always excited to know that Aunt Avette was coming and she was bringing Karen and Van and Uncle David. We knew we were going to be having a great time because those cousins were going to be there. But the thing I also knew that was the most special thing, and I still remember that flavor in my mind today, was this cake she would make and bring. I couldn't wait until Aunt Avette would come and bring us this cake that was made of cinnamon and butter and toasted nuts, and it was a little bundt cake, and I think it had sour cream in it. And it was the most divine piece of pastry I ever ate. And every time I would think about Aunt Avette, it wasn't all the things you all thought about. Bing! That little thing came up in my head. It was like Aunt Avette's cake. So, I mean, it was like we always remembered that delicious cake. That was one of the things. But when I got a little older and I needed a job, when I was probably about 13 and a half or 14, I think that was when they had David's House of Fashions downtown. And so I went up to Aunt Avette one day and said, Aunt Avette, I need a job. I need to start raising some money so I can afford a horse. And so she liked that, and she said, okay, come on in on Saturdays and we'll show you a few things. What I remember the most about working at David's House of Fashions was how you straighten the clothes up on the racks. There was a technique called fingers. You put your fingers between the hangers. You give them a shake. You go around to the next ones. You give them a shake. Well, okay, so till the same day today, I find myself going into my closet. I look at the mess. Oy, it's all together. I need to find those slacks again. I put my fingers in there. I give them a shake. I thank Aunt Avette for that little bit of wisdom. Thank you.
Thank you. I need you when I have to get cat food on the top shelf. I have written several eulogies. I've written them for my parents and friends, and of course for Karen. But today, as I ponder the loss of my aunt, I will wonder if I will ever be seen again by someone. Avette had this quality that's rare. She could see people's authenticity. She could see beyond their wounds and their mask. She could appreciate the beauty in everyone. I don't think I'm unique in feeling this way. I think almost everyone here feels the same. I think she was so real, and I think she was so present that there's no words to describe how it felt to be with her. We felt seen, I felt heard, and I felt understood. Having someone in my life like this was like finding a diamond in the sand, almost impossible. When I visited with her in October, in spite of the fact that the wheelchair fell off the curb, and then the elevator started to close on the wheelchair, and the door started to close on the wheelchair, we still had a lovely time. Obviously, I don't come with references. As I was leaving, I asked her if there was anything I could do for her, and she said, just be happy. She didn't want more for herself, but she wanted more for me. She wanted happiness for everyone she knew. This is why the caregivers asked to take care of her during her final days. This is why Marilyn, who comes from a lovely family, called her mom. This is why her grandchildren wept. This is why, as the love in the room, as the family and friends visited, was like watching something sad and beautiful all at the same moment. As we said our goodbyes, a bright light fell on everyone, even though the sun was going down. As most of you know, I believe in an afterlife. At one point, the caregivers heard her say, my baby, take me, take me. I knew Karen was there. We never die alone. Someone always comes to escort us to the next chapter. Years ago, I interviewed a man whose son had been murdered. The father had a dream about his son. His son was in the driveway working on his car like he did every day. And the father said to the son, what are you doing here? I thought you died. And the son said, oh no, I didn't die. I just don't work here anymore. Avette will continue to work in our lives too. Although I fixed Marilyn and Vanna 45 years ago, I guess because I disappeared for about 30, I still find seeing them with their children and grandchildren with Avette as something new every time we're together. Their love and dedication for her cannot be matched. She got her wings knowing she was loved and cared for deeply. In Israel, there are wedding bands that say, I am my beloved and my beloved is mine. that describes my aunt. She is our beloved, and we are her beloveds. That will never die.
It's wonderful to hear so many memories and stories. Something that these funerals, these celebrations of life point out to us is that our lives intersect with people at so many different points. And when you hear stories of someone who had a full 94 years, you realize there were so many different moments along the journey. And so while I know there are many more people who would love to share a memory at this moment, they're not going to, I do want to suggest that if in the days to come a memory comes up, could be a memory from decades and decades ago, that you take a moment, that you write that down, that you save it, you share it with her grandchildren, to share with her great-grandchildren, so that some of those qualities and attributes, those things that made her unique, not only now, but even when she was a young woman, a long time ago, growing up, or as a young married woman, that her children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren can benefit from those memories. Following our time here, there'll be a reception, an opportunity to offer comfort to the family and to share memories and stories and jokes and anecdotes. And then, of course, we'll be remembering Avette not only on Friday nights for the 30-day period of mourning that is known as Shloshim on Friday nights, but we also have a daily minyan that meets here Monday through Thursday at 6, and we'll be also mentioning Avette's name tonight at that as well. You're welcome to come and bring the family comfort there if you wish. We turn to El Malei Rachamim. We think of the Kaddish as the memorial prayer, but the Kaddish does not speak of death at all. The Kaddish speaks about living our lives in holy ways in the presence of loss, sanctifying God, sanctifying the moments. I think Avette would have appreciated that. Before we do that, El Malei Rachamim is the Jewish prayer of mourning as we ask God to watch over her. Please rise. El Malei Rachamim, Shochem Bamromim, Hamse Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Hashchina, Im Kedoshim Utorim Kazohar Rakia, Mazirim et Nishmat, Avette Shahalcha Liolama, Ba'ah Rachamim, Yastireha Beseter Kenafav Liolamim, Vaitzror b'yitzur ha'chaim en nishmata, Adonai hu nachalata, v'tanuach b'shalom, al mishkava, v'nomar, Amen. Compassionate God, Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest to our beloved Avette, who has entered eternity. O God, let her find refuge in the shadow of your wings, and let her soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is her inheritance. May she rest in peace. As together we say, Amen. And we turn to the back of these pamphlet service sheets where we find the words of the mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbi, bi'almal divrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei. V'chayechon v'yomechon, v'chaye d'chol Beit Yisrael, ba'galal v'zman kari v'imru Amen. Yehi shmei Rabba mevarach le'olam u'lamei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach, v'yitba'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitala. Shmei d'kudsha b'richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbachata v'nechemata, damiram b'yalma v'imru Amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemai, v'chayim aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael, v'imru Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael, v'imru Amen. Hamakom yenachem etchem b'toch sha'ar avlei Tzion v'Yerushalayim. We pray that God will bring peace in remembering and in living to all who knew and loved Avette. And I ask you to let the immediate family and then extended family go first, so they can be there to greet you as we join them at the reception to the right as you leave the building in the gathering area.